So I'm pretty sure that Reaper can seem daunting, especially with the amount of updates that we are having. And even though I also watch Reaper blog videos, sometimes I simply can't keep up with the amount of updates that we have. So weeks ago, I told you that I was thinking of a way to build on the idea of the series that I was making, that is, look what I found on Reaper. And I'm trying to sum up the most important things that I think are, for my workflow, really useful. But I'm trying to group 10 updates in one single video. So it should be a lot more oriented in very specific ways. So let's try this out. Let's explore a lot more new features in Reaper. And again, I'll try to do these kind of videos every 10 updates. So in this case, we're going to go through all of these updates. They aren't as many as you might think. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and let's just get into it. Okay, so for us to be able to more or less follow this, I'm going to take on some of the ideas that John has used for so many years. And I'm trying to more or less organize so it's easier. So regarding the appearance, one of the things that we can do is, I don't think it's way too useful, but some people might lose their mouse position across their screen. I don't, because I have this pink circle all of the time. It's called Pro Mouse, and it lets me draw and do a lot of other things. I don't use the drawings. I only use the halo and the zoom in built in. Like, those are the things that I use. But for those of you that are simply sometimes losing their mouse position, under Preferences, under Appearance, you will have this option that says Display Vertical Line at Mouse Position. And once I apply it, you will see that it follows my mouse position. It could be way too thick, and it can get confusing when you're playing something in the back. And I don't know, like, I don't really like it, but some of you might. Under Appearance and Media, we have Maximum Stretch Marker Handle Size. And remember that within the mouse modifiers, you might change this to whatever is better for you. And I have a couple of videos on editing. So even though I have my Add Stretch Markers on shortcuts on my keyboard, if you're having trouble looking at them, because maybe they're the same color as your waveform, you might want to change the percentage of how much this represents. So let's go crazy with 50%. And now it's super big. I don't really like it. It's useful. And once you hover across the stretch marker, your mouse changes. So I wouldn't mess too much with it unless you're actually having a hard time finding them. One thing that I use a lot is the Reaper modulation. And I have talked on so many videos about this. So you can last click any parameter on your screen, click on this plus button, and you can click on this parameter and then parameter modulation mid-link, assign an LFO, and now we have this pin button up here where you can just pin this window so it doesn't close. If you don't have this pin, whenever you click outside of it, what would happen is that it would close, but now you can have it at hand. Maybe you're doing some modular or deeply cyclical movement across your session and you want to have this at hand so you can fine-tune it, and there you have it. Like, now you have it at hand. Regarding editing, double clicking when comping lanes. So this is something that I learned by making many mistakes. And remember that when you're comping, specifically comping, what you want and try to do is, if you're changing your takes into lanes, you have to double click this circle so you can switch from selecting the lanes, editing them, and drawing between each other. Like, this is really important for your workflow. Otherwise, you can probably mess around this really, really easily. And I remember trying to learn the comping system that's different from the takes, and I have a video on that as well. And one of the things that took me a long time to understand was why sometimes I was watching this drawing pencil and sometimes I wasn't. So you can just double click right here so you can jump into that kind of editing. You can change your takes into lanes and arrow with show only lane. So if you're trying to build a comp, you now have Toggle show play only one fixed item lane, and this could be useful for some workflows if you don't like seeing the clutter of many tracks. You can see right here on the left that it says C1, that means comp 1, and you can switch between the different and available comps. I can just double click it and I can create another comp. And the whole idea of working with different available comps is that this is actually just a take, because it doesn't have a C on it, and you can start separating this. Also, by hitting this arrow right here, you can change that way of visualizing it. You can expand it or collapse it. You also have the option right here, show play only lane or play only a specific lane. This plays along really well with the idea of comping into new lanes. So if you're watching all of your lanes, you might want to have either some floating toolbar that helps you run this and not having to learn more shortcuts on your keyboard. Or you can just start adding empty lanes where you can start dragging and doubling this by holding the mouse modifier that you have selected. In my case, it's Command, and just start building and turning this into new comps. And you can say this is comp 3. And you can start building your own comps here if you don't want to build them across different tracks. I want to remind you that the way I work when I'm recording is I have one recording track. I'm just going to name it so you understand what I'm talking about. And I have probably some sort of amount of available tracks where I'm just emptying down whatever I've been recording. So in this case, I would be working with something like this. And if this is the take that the artist liked, then I can just drag this one down. And even if the artist is recording again, they can listen to themselves, and I don't have to start battling and trying to figure out what's what and trying to punch in and punch out a lot of things. And also this lets me drag down stuff easier into verse, pre-chorus, or even something like chorus, right? So maybe this one was right for that, maybe this one was right for that, and maybe this one goes right here, right? Across time, of course. I saw John talk about it, but I think it's useful to know how it works, because some things like that have making me go a bit crazy. So the splitting thing, the split items, remember that splitting in Reaper means cutting, right? And I can split under my mouse, I can split at my edit cursor right here, but right now the split is actually selecting left to whatever you split. You can change that, or you can change the action to make split item under cursor and select right. And now they inverted this. As far as I remember that video, they inverted the way it works. So if you're trying to split and select right, you might want to add some sort of modifier in case you want that extra step to be faster. If not, just check these actions that are available searching with something like split item and right or left, or select, because that's going to show you what will happen after splitting the item. In my case, I only need something like this. Split at 0 crossings, that I think Reaper Tips already showcased the shortcut. That way, even if I'm trying to cut something right here, my split will happen at 0 crossing. If I do it under mouse cursor, it's going to let me split it right there. And that's going to be hard, and it's going to generate some clicks that we probably don't need. Split at take markers does exactly what it does. I have an action assigned to add edit marker, take marker at play position or edit cursor. And this is helpful because sometimes I'm listening back and I don't want to fill myself with markers up top. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on what I'm doing, but maybe I want to add click, like specific information right there, and I can have it right there. And maybe I want to split something right there, and I can just use that action, split at take markers, all takes, active takes, etc. I run this and close it, and it's right there. And remember that there are a lot of actions related to split. You can split related to your markers, all takes. You can split to your stretch items. Like, you can split so many ways your items. In any case, my best suggestion would be that just be careful when splitting, not having these strange zero crossings happen, so you don't find these clicks going on. And that's why I use a lot the cut on the zero crossing, especially when I'm dealing with content like this. And if I want to cut this one, I might just want to really match my fade in and my fade out and try to get the softest and the smoothest transition from one to another. Something like this could work, right? Delete take markers in time selection. That works again super well. I've been including a lot of take markers in my workflow. I think they are visually a lot less invasive than other stuff. And again, once you're doing probably most of your editing and you figured out all of your take markers and you want to remove all of those nodes, you might just want to delete take markers in time selection and they are gone. These take markers in comping lanes updates associated media items works really well. Let's suppose for a moment that you have something like this. And again, you start adding take markers somewhere around here, and you might want to add 1, you might want to add 3, and here you might want to add 5. And since this one is your comping lane, whenever you update this one on the bottom, as you can see, it removes it from there, right? But if I bring this one up, it comes up. The issue with this was that if it wasn't working the other way around. So if I update this one, now it updates the one on the bottom, the source one. And even if I change the third lane or whatever lane was selected and was edited as a take marker, will preserve the take marker in action. There are a lot of other marker actions related, such as add take marker at mouse position at time selection. Probably one really useful thing to know is that this length of the take markers is set in bars. So you might want to change or adjust the length of it, because you can adjust it with bars, quarter nodes, and 16th nodes. So if I set it to 1 bar, there you go. The other thing is I have a specific color for by default on all of my take markers, and I have shown this in the past. And you can just look at the theme tweak configuration window, and you can just look for your take markers and change your default colors of when the media item is selected and it isn't. So it's easier to find from a distance. The ranking system of the items I feel is kind of silly, but I have used it. I tried it because otherwise there's no way of me actually saying if I like it or I don't, or if it fits my workflow or it doesn't. So maybe I could add somewhere here in my recording toolbar so I don't have much more shortcuts on my keyboard. The rank up and cycle through rank up and rank down. And the only thing it adds is smiley faces and angry faces. If I don't like the take, I would probably just delete it. I wouldn't place an angry face towards it. I would use more the happy faces. And it's probably just to select between those takes that I like the most, which one would be better as a main take and which ones could go in the back. Like, that's the only thing I would try to use for me to remember a bit better what's where and how much I liked it. Because when you're recording, there are a lot of things happening at the same time. So you have to keep up with all of that information. If you're having problems with that, use something like the ranking. So if you're like just thinking in the Reaper way of building stuff, you can assign to a mouse modifier your cycle through up, rank, down, rank levels of take marker at mouse position, because you want it to add always where you're clicking. And I'm doing this to the bottom half of my left click. So now I can do this really fast. And in the end, these small smiley faces could go anywhere, and I wouldn't have 3 of them at the same time. Or if you don't want them to be all spaced out, you might want to use it for the last recording pass. I would only beware with the media bottom half double click action so it doesn't get in the way. So you just have to do it a little bit more spaced out. Otherwise, any action that you have on your double click will happen, and probably that's just a bit of a hassle and something that you don't want. But that seems to work, especially let's suppose that you're doing some sort of big editing like this and you're trying to just pick the best of everything. You can always use the action clear rank up and rank down markers, and you can start fiddling around with that action, and you can just start playing one and hitting like this. Okay, this is wrong, I want to mute this one, and this one is okay, this one is really good. And you can start doing that selection. You can really clean up all of your takes, finally settle the editing down, and then remove all of the muted items. Also maybe clicking at the bottom half and holding some sort of mouse modifier, or just going one after the other, deleting them. Another preference that you might want to change for the editing is the Crossfade center default on items. And if I'm not mistaken, it's right here under Project, Item Fade Defaults, and you can go into Split Media Items and you can Crossfade Center instead of Crossfading Right. Again, it has more to do with the way you are working. So try and figure out what's best for you. If you want to push it to the right or push it to the left, it really depends on how you're editing. And remember, this one plays along really well with a crossfade editor window, because if you have several crossfades and you want to check them one by one, you might want to use this crossfade editor and move from one to another and just really check if you want to adjust anything of the shape, etc., etc. You can play it right here, you can audition it, blah, blah, blah. Like, you have a ton of options in the crossfade editor, but this is a really intense way of editing. Okay, jumping into envelopes and automation. Let's suppose that we have this queue right here. And for a long time, in case you haven't updated, we had a really ugly envelope window that it should show up around here, but I don't have it at sight because on my track control panel, I have hidden all of my envelopes always. Otherwise, they would be right here, and I can just click it, and now we have a new way of browsing into them. I don't know. I don't know why I don't like them right there. Like, I don't know. So probably just to clean up a bit my screen space, I will try it like this. If this track is not selected, this won't show up. But the whole point with this is that it doesn't matter how many plugins you have. Let's suppose I'm using ReQ and the 1175. And I just want to search for one specific parameter. We can use this filter section, for example, threshold. And now I have it at hand. I can make it visible. I can arm the envelope. I can have a specific MIDI controller that I have at hand, so I can learn the MIDI of it and I can adjust it by hand with some physical interaction with it. And I can apply this parameter just right here at hand. And I could show it on my track control panel or my mixer control panel UI. That way, whenever I'm playing with it and I'm writing the automation of this track, I can access it from right here. And I don't have to have this envelope down there. So I might want to try and concentrate only on listening, and I can adjust this without having to open the plugin. It's bugging out like crazy because I'm recording from my computer. But now you will see that this threshold is going to be automated, right? And if I open my envelopes, it's right there. But it's just an easy way of accessing all of that information if you need it. The other thing that I like from this new way of browsing for parameters is I really like the idea of having shown up top the last parameter that I touched. So that's why I have this column selected. Otherwise, if I have the active filter or the visual filter or the arm, blah, 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 I can always see the last one that I touched. So for example, I touched the frequency high pass and the compressor. But let's suppose that I added a new band and I was doing something like this and I want to automate the bandwidth because, I don't know, that's useful. And I can open up my envelopes and I can see envelope band 2 right here. and I can just open it. And I also have an action for that that's called show height track take envelope for last touch FX parameter, option A. That way, even if I don't have this open, I can adjust maybe the gain, right? And I just hit option A, and now I have it right there. And if I want to adjust my release, I have it right there. And if I want to adjust my mix, I have it right there. This is really fast, and I can just hide them if I want to. And again, you might want to add them right here if that's part of your workflow, or you might want to edit them as visually right here by showing and hiding the envelopes, however you see fit. I'm cleaning this list as I go because it makes sense. Like some things aren't really as important. Let's suppose for a moment that you're editing something like this. So if I hold shift, I know why this is in Spanish. So let's suppose for a moment that I have this envelope right here and I have something like this. And usually what we want to do for smoothing this one out is if I want to create some sort of S, I would have to add an extra point right there, hold option, and I can do something like this, right? Or I can just hold shift and I can try and build a new dot from wherever I'm. It's kind of strange for me that this is always deeply related to the time selection in many ways. So you might want to try moving all of the envelope in different ways. Because for example, it might be easier to just delete this one. And if I hold shift and left click, you will see that I will add another dot right there. It kind of makes sense, but if I'm doing a lot of dots at the same time and I'm holding shift as I'm drawing them again, most of these things you can change them and adjust them within the mouse modifiers. In the envelope points, you can use left track holding shift. In my case, freehand draw envelope, and you can play around with a lot of these things. In the envelope lane, if I hold shift, I'm going to insert an envelope point and I can ignore the snap, or I can have the snap on because maybe I'm doing some grid editing of my automation. A lot of these updates have to do more with how does this fit the way you have been working up till now. The default point shapes are really useful, and you can just right click and default your point shape for slow start and end, or whatever these work best for you. Regarding item handling, that probably could be closer to the editing one. This is an action that I think is really useful overall, to have some sort of keyboard pressing just to select your next item across tracks. So if for any reason you are editing something like this and you just want to jump from one to another, you can use usually something like move cursor to next transient items, or you can use some action that has to do with moving your cursor to your left to the edge of the item or to the right of the item. And the good thing of this one is that it is across all tracks. If I'm using this one to move my cursor right to the edge of the item and I have something like this, what you will see that happen is whenever I hit this action, it ends up right there and it's not jumping to the next item. So this one, in my case, it ended up being unuseful. And now I'm using sometimes this other action that is select next item across tracks. The only thing that could be strange of the workflow of this one is that whenever you hit that action, see how it's prioritizing the first track and then moving into the other one? And that's not super useful. I have one to move across tracks, right? I have one to jump from one media item to another from one track. I have one that's this one that says select and move to item in the next track. But what's odd on the behavior on this one is that it's not counting up towards the end. Like, I don't know why does it work that way. But if you're doing something like select and move to next item, you will see that it behaves properly. So this is a shortcut from Ableton Live, and that's why I use that one. And whenever you're building your own shortcut, you might want to check only with the action list if it's doing whatever you're looking for before assigning it to any hotkey. So the way I normally work around this is I have several actions that are building on this idea. So for me to move across these ones, I would probably do something like this. and I can use the other actions to move from one track to another, such as select and move to item on previous track, and from there I can start navigating again using my other shortcut. And that is really useful for navigation. If you haven't tried working with groups in Reaper, what you will see is that if you hit G, I think that's the default shortcut for it, is that you group your items, any amount of items that you might have. So if I double click the head of the track and I hit G, I will see this link icon. And now whenever I do one action to one, it's going to do to all of them. But the way this behaves is that I can have several groups that aren't related to each other, right? I could even make a new group where all of them are grouped. And sometimes keeping track of all of the groups could be painful. So I have an action also for removing items from group. And I can just select everything in my session by holding something like Command A and select all tracks, items, envelopes, and then hit remove items from group. You could also run a specific action if you just want to remove something like the track grouping for the selected tracks, and this also works great. But yeah. Regarding the MIDI editor, I have a ton of things to say about the MIDI editor on Reaper, but I've been trying to set it up just as I want it. I still haven't managed to do it. That's why I have that video pending. But the whole idea of having your grid set to measure is working great. The snap to key signature is working also great. So maybe if you're trying to compose something or make some music and you're not like deeply musically trained, you might just want to use this bottom section where you say key snap, set it to on, and you might want to use something like E minor, natural minor. And we have a couple of actions right here. You might want to use something like E minor, and now we have a couple of extra actions right here that could prove useful. I can move my notes, my selected notes, one semitone, but this is always related to my scale because it's snapped to my scale. See, from E, I go to F sharp, to G, to A, and I'm not hitting all of the in-between notes. So I have another action set for that that's right underneath that says move notes up one semitone, ignoring key scale. That way, I can do small adjustments and editing when I want to go through some notes out of the scale. Okay, and this one is super strange, the drag and render, editing behavior, mouse modifier, render items to new file. So let's suppose for a moment that I have only this one, and I go into my mouse modifiers, and I go into media item, and maybe I want it to be set up something right here, and I can render my item to a new file. So if I have Shift Option Control, and I just drag this, like it's going to render it. I don't know, seems kind of useful. Does it? Like, do you think that's useful? I don't know, someone might find some use for that. Okay, this one is a big for me. Clean project directory. So if you have a big session where you have been recording and you have a ton of things happening, you will see that some files might appear as unavailable. For example, all of these are the examples for the takes that I recorded for this video, and they are no longer available. And I can send them to trash first and then remove them from my computer. My best suggestion for this is that whenever you finish any sort of production and you finally end up cleaning up everything, run this project directory cleanup, remove every selected file into the trash. You have to select all of them, again, Command A, and remove all of them. You close your project, you open it again, and if you're not missing any files, you're safe to delete them for the rest of your life. I know megas and gigas aren't so much of a concern right now, but still, those can really, really pile up fast if you're not being careful. Okay, recording. Command plus Alt plus click, exclusive arm toggle. This could be useful because sometimes you don't need to have several tracks recording at the same time. Sometimes you might want to just record like this, and I have the video on the recording modes. Sometimes you want to have the toggle automatic record arm when track selected. But I feel like this will make me fail a lot of times, since also this is per track. So if I unselect the track, I will stop recording, and I don't see so many actual useful situations for me, because I will probably be messing around with other stuff while I'm recording, since I'm most of the time recording other people, not recording myself. But one useful thing would be to have this Command Alt option where I can just turn off the armed or the previously armed track, and I can arm the new one instead of having to turn this one off, click and turn this one on. This also works for the solo. If you have one track soloed and you want to jump into another one, you will see that if you hold Command and Option, it cancels the previous solo and it jumps into the new one. And honestly, that's long enough. Like, there are a ton of things to think about, all of those updates. I think most or the biggest updates that I can take from the 710 to the 720 are mostly editing shortcuts or editing workflow advantages regarding how to deal around with your takes, how to deal with comping lanes, some new advantages that I really like regarding the automations. And honestly, those are my big takes or the things that I think are most valuable in this specific update. If you want to ask any of these questions real time, be sure to join us on the Discord that was made by Let's Talk About Reaper, and it's linked in the description, or jump to any of the channels of the Reaper Squad to see all of their content. They're doing great stuff. If you like my content, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link at the bottom, also linked in the description, if you want to support a little bit of my work. And even though there will be many videos where I will be, and even though many of the upcoming videos will be on plugins, on paid plugins, I won't stop doing videos on Reaper. I want to be very clear on that. I think there's a lot to take from those paid plugins that I would really encourage you to watch one from beginning to end, because again, there's a lot of thinking of why this work, kind of how does this work, how can we take advantage of it, and let's just try to make the most out of every single situation. Hit that notification bell so you can watch every single video, share, comment, subscribe, and do all of those things that people on YouTube say. Straight from Mexico City, my name is Juanchis, and thanks for listening.